If you look at the top 10 lists for student aspirations in 2026, the data tells a very specific story. We've seen a massive shift away from the traditional vocations towards things like influencer, entrepreneur, and content creator.
It's a shift toward autonomy. The cultural North Star for our kids isn't just success anymore. It's visibility and independence. The message they hear from every screen is, you are the CEO of your own life. Use your talents to build your platform, increase your following, and secure your own future.
And as parents, it's easy to buy into that. We want our kids to be successful. We want them to have the scholarship and the high-paying career. But if we aren't careful, we can accidentally disciple them into a worldview where their gifts exist solely for their own upward mobility.
The Bible offers a radical alternative. It tells us that our talents are not actually ours. They are kingdom capital on loan from the Master. Today, we're talking about how to pivot our kids from a mindset of getting ahead to a mindset of giving back.
Welcome to Equipped for Impact, the podcast designed to assist Christian parents, leaders, and educators to raise up the next generation to stand firm in their faith and influence the world for Christ. We're your hosts. I'm Nate.
And I'm Lewis.
And we're glad you're here with us today, where we're in part 2 of a 3-part mini-series called The Achievement Trap: How to Disciple Driven Kids. Today, we're looking at that idea of ambition. How can we move from upward mobility to outward ministry? So before we jump into this, Lewis, congratulations. This is episode number 50 for us.
This is the big 5-0.
5-0. 5-0. Almost as many episodes as you've been alive.
Almost.
No,
a little bit more.
The opposite.
The opposite, right?
Okay, there we go.
However, I have always said that 50 is old. So, that was my benchmark, right? As I was growing up, if you made it to 50, you were old. And anything above 50, you're just old.
You're really older.
Old. But now, as I'm closer to 50, I'm like, 50 is really not that old.
It's not that old. As you see it down the path.
That's right. As it is inching closer. So.
There we go.
But 50 episodes is a lot of episodes.
It is a lot of episodes. Most podcasts die after, is it 6 or 7 or something like that?
Maybe 41.
Maybe 41. No, I think it's 10. So
10.
We are doing good. I'm excited. And thank you to all of our listeners for helping us get to 50, because your feedback has been awesome. Speaking of that, if you jump on whatever podcast tool you're using, app or whatever, and give us a rating, give us a review, we'd love to hear it, just to help make us better, and maybe even shoot us an email so that we have more ideas for our next 50 episodes.
And we want to thank our millions and millions of listeners.
Yep. Hyperbole.
To borrow from The Rock.
The Rock, millions and millions.
Yeah, so he used to say...
I noticed that he has to explain this to me. I know who The Rock is.
You know who The Rock is.
I don't know anything else about it.
When he used to come out to the ring and he would, announce, he would say to the millions and millions of The Rock's fans.
Okay. Do we have millions of fans?
I'm sure we do.
Probably.
There's billions of people in the world, right?
They just don't know that they're fans yet.
They just don't know that they're fans.
But you can help, listener, by giving us a rating and review and sharing it with someone you know. Okay, let's get back into this, because here's the thing we're talking about with this ambition trap and the achievement trap. We really want to help our students, our children, work through this. And so the phrase we hear a lot in our culture is, you can be anything you want to be, which sounds good, right? You talk to a little girl and just be like, you can be the president, you can be an astronaut, you can be a whatever. And it sounds like an encouragement. But from a biblical standpoint, that's actually a bit of a burden, right? Because it puts the weight of self-creation entirely on our children's shoulders.
And that's actually where Scripture gives us a different starting point, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
1 Corinthians 12 reminds us that the Spirit distributes gifts as He wills. We aren't anything we want to be. We are exactly who God designed us to be for the sake of the body of Christ.
Yeah, and so our culture pushes this idol of specialization, right? We see kids as young as, 10 to 12 years old to like specializing in something. Like I've got to get ahead. They're already thinking, 12 steps down the line.
Yeah.
And so by the time, I'm a senior, I need to be ready to have a scholarship lined up for this college to do this thing. And so you see families sacrificing church and rest and community all on the altar of the grind towards this specialization. So they think that their kid is like the next MLB, first round draft pick.
Atlanta Braves, right?
No, because they don't get to pick in the first round because they're too good to get a first round draft pick. That's what it is. No, but they think that. And so they've got, like I'm seeing some kids like it's baseball season right now, so I'm seeing like bags full of, so much stuff because they think their kid's going to be a pro baseball player one day. And it's not bad necessarily.
Yeah.
But if that's so much pressure on your kid, like that's a struggle, right? So whether it's elite sports or high stakes academics, all of this is in hopes of being, having that 1% chance that they're gonna make it, so to speak.
I remember reading about these schools that are popping up around the country, and they're homeschool schools, I guess, that are online platforms for kids to do their schoolwork in like 2 or 3 hours, and then spend the rest of their day specializing in a sport or specializing in dance or specializing in some type of field where they can become masters at their craft. And so for these parents, they are doing homeschool, but it's not with the intention of academics. It's with the intention of their kid becoming the best at whatever it is that they're talking about. And then
super specializing.
Yeah. And the ultimate goal of that specialization is usually upward mobility, right? But Jesus stands that pyramid on its head. When we look at the Gospel of Matthew, we see where Jesus says, "Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve." And so if we use our talents just to get attention, that's consumerism. I mean, we want to move our kids towards stewardship, towards seeing their gifts as something that God has given them for His glory, not theirs.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And to be clear here, we're not talking about mediocrity, right? You're not doing, God's glory any favor by just being mediocre at whatever you're doing, right? Plenty of Bible verses talking against that, right? In Colossians, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, right? Is an example of that. So, we're not calling for mediocrity or I hate, here's pet peeve. I'm going to go down the rabbit trail. Like this whole idea, the Christian movies, you know what I'm talking about? And especially when we were growing up, it's like that was code for we're going to settle for subpar, thematic experience because we slapped the Christian label on it. Like we don't want any of that in anything we do, right? But we're saying, we're doing this to, impact the world for Christ, right? It's a good kingdom ambition with that.
And that's like, we want to be clear, like, we need Christian doctors, right?
Yeah.
We need Christian athletes. We need Christian actors.
Absolutely.
I've said to people here in our community about our school that, like, I want Christian plumbers. I want Christian welders. I want, selfishly, I want Christian landscapers. And that's why we exist, right? But we want people to be Christian in whatever field God has called them to.
Right.
And so kingdom ambition says, I will work harder than anyone else to be the best in my field, not so I can buy a bigger house, but so I have a bigger platform to display the character of God. And really, that's what we read in the parable of the talents in the Gospel of Matthew, right?
Yep.
The servants are not praised just for having the talents. They were praised because they put those talents to work for the master's gain.
Yeah. So parents, what you need to do, what we need to do is audit this success language in our homes, right? When your child succeeds, they come home with, straight A's on their report card. They come home with, a trophy from a tournament or, a contest or whatever it is, a fine arts festival. Is our first comment about how much money they might make one day? Or is it about how that skill can help them solve a problem to meet people's needs, right? There, we've got we have to bridge the gap from me and what about me to about the mission that God has called us to.
And that's absolutely critical because that's turning our culture on its head, right? Like you don't hear that anywhere. Like, for example, right? Parents get really excited when their kids say they want to be a doctor or they want to be an engineer or they want to become an attorney, right? Like those are things that we're like, yes, that's so good. But what about if your kid says, I want to be a pastor? Or what if they say, I want to be a missionary? Or what if they say, I want to be a homemaker? Or what if they say, I want to become a doctor and I want to use my gifts to work in inner city, low income medical field, right? Or what if they say, I want to become an attorney, but I want to work for a nonprofit that serves underprivileged communities, right? Like immediately we're excited because our kid wants to be a lawyer for this mega firm in an urban area where they're going to make a lot of money. But what if they're like, no, I want to be an attorney and I want to connect that work to the kingdom. And so we're not saying that it has to be one or the other. So please don't hear what we're not saying, right? But what we are saying is, are we helping our kids to bridge that gap from me? What do I want to gain? What do I want to get out of this to the mission? And then that brings us right into a practical tool that I think is going to be helpful for you to help your child as they are unpacking this conversation. And so you'll remember that last week we unpacked this idea of the identity audit, right? Like helping your child identify what are the things that make them important, right? Listing those 5 things. Well,
and then what we talked about last week was what happens if those things were to go away, right? And so if you've got that good foundation of who am I, not because of what I do, but because of who God says I am, that's your starting point. So if you missed that, go back to last week's episode and check that one out because we're building on that today.
Absolutely. And so we said that your student needs to know who they are before they can figure out what they're for. And then this is where that idea becomes really practical.
Yeah, so one of the pastors here in North Carolina, a pretty big church, J.D. Greer of the Summit Church, I love the way he frames it. It's around what he calls the 3 A's, okay? Ability, affinity, and affirmation, okay? Think of these like a Venn diagram. They're overlapping circles, and right there in the middle where all 3 meet is the sweet spot of what we're kind of looking for as far as calling goes with this tool.
And that's right there in that sweet spot is where the calling is going to live. So let's walk through each one of these together, right?
Yep.
So ability is simply what you're good at. It is your raw, God-given wiring. These are the skills and experiences where you naturally succeed. And here's the honest part, right? It also means acknowledging where you don't. Like, for example, growing up, I was pretty fast. Interestingly enough, we recently had a race that I was a part of.
We did have a race.
And people were very surprised by how fast I was and still am.
Still over the width of a football field.
Over the width of a football field.
That was the race.
That's right. But I'm not as fast as I used to be. But growing up, I was, right? I competed in a 100-meter dash. That was a natural ability. I didn't have to train.
So hold on. Before we move any further, okay, are you ready to acknowledge who actually won that sprint across the football field?
I think it's still up for debate.
It's still up for debate.
It's still up for debate.
There may be pictures and videos to show who was the first to cross the line. But
we live in a world of AI, deep fakes.
We're going that direction now.
Who knows, right? But there's things that
it was me.
People are naturally good at, right? I'm not naturally good at basketball.
Me neither.
And so I was never a good basketball player, but I was pretty fast. I've always kind of naturally been just kind of a good project manager. Like, if we had group projects in school, I just kind of rose to a project lead, and those gifts were just natural to me. And so that's what ability is, right? It's those skills you experience where you naturally succeed. You don't have to work really hard at it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to put this in here. Depending on the age of your child, one of your important roles as a parent is to help them discover this, because we tell our kids all the time, like, you don't know till you try. And even if you try, you're not going to be good the first time you do something. And so this is where, and I guess, as an educator, this is my philosophy of education showing, like the over specialization we've already talked about on this episode. I think that, limits our children's opportunities in the long run, because we don't give them the opportunity to try out different things. Try out different sports, try out fine arts. Like, no, you're not going to, like, you're going to be nervous. You get up and sing in front of a group, or, try some art. And so, like, giving your child a plethora of opportunities where they can discover what they're good at is really important, especially in that phase. I mean, even all the way up into high school, they're still figuring that out. And so it's important to kind of like leave this as an open circle, so to speak.
So what you're saying is that if my toddler picks up a baseball with their left hand, does not mean they're going to be the next great left-handed pitcher for the Atlanta Braves.
Not necessarily. It could be because they had a cookie in their right hand and they didn't want to put the cookie down to pick up the baseball.
Got it.
Yeah. Or maybe it was a slice of French toast at like 11 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh,
and they needed to use their left hand to pick up the baseball.
That would be disappointing.
Would it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we could add that extra jab in there about our abilities.
So tell us about Affinity. What is Affinity?
So Affinity, right? This is something like you can look at it different ways. On the one side, it's just something that you enjoy doing because you may be good at something, but not enjoy it at all. That is very possible, especially, adults listening to this, they understand you can get good at a job, you can get good at a talent or something and still not enjoy it, right?
True.
So do you even enjoy it? Another thing to think of it is what is it that breaks your heart, right?
Good.
This would be like the burden that God has placed on you for a specific need or a specific type of person. And a lot of times that burden is shaped by something you've personally walked through. So again, your children are still figuring this out. They are still accumulating life experience where God is shaping them and molding them. Again, I've heard J.D. Greer talk about this in his sermons, where he says, not everything that comes from heaven has your name on it.
That's really good.
But something does. And so like, homeless ministry and, orphans and widows or international ministry or whatever, like, we should, as believers, have a heart for all of those things just in general, right? But there's going to be one thing or maybe a handful of things that really breaks your heart, that your child is really burdened for. And they're going to pick up these burdens as they do different things and experience different things. And so just have that conversation of what is in that affinity circle? What is it that God has laid on your heart? Again, going on missions trips, being involved in service, like that's going to help them see, like God's going to open their eyes to a certain need that breaks their heart.
And then there's affirmation, right? This one matters because we all have blind spots. And affirmation is when the people around you, your community, those closest to you, maybe even those who aren't close to you, but who see you in this, they say things like, when you do this, God moves, right? Or when you do this, it makes a huge impact. And people are impacted. That external confirmation, that affirmation is part of how God reveals calling.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I love that from the book of Acts. We see that, it's right there in the Bible where the people were serving and praying. And in that moment, God used the church to call out Barnabas and Saul, later called the Apostle Paul, to go serve, right? And so God was using his people to affirm his calling on these people's lives, right? And so here's the thing that every parent needs to hear, right? You don't need to wait on some mystical sign for your child to know what God's calling is, right? There's not going to be an audible voice. He's not going to spell it out in your Cheerios, mostly because it's only one letter, right? Maybe in your alphabet soup. I don't know. I don't eat that. But you just need to get started, get serving, and God will reveal the next step as you are actively serving him where he's given you, right? And it's going to be somewhere in the middle where those three circles of ability, affinity, and affirmation meet.
And so here's, parents, what you can do this week with your child. Sit down with them at the kitchen table, find a piece of paper, find 10 minutes, draw those three circles, and walk through each one together. What are they genuinely good at, right? What breaks their heart? What draws their attention? What do they enjoy? And what have people in their life affirmed in them? And then let them answer. You might be surprised what you find out.
Yeah, and the goal is to get them asking a different question, right? It's not, what can my gifts do for me, but what has God wired me to do for others, right? That's the shift. It's a really different way to look at life, and it moves them from just having talent to actually living on mission. You know, there's, again, several different biblical examples of this, but you think about in Proverbs, it talks about, you know, do you see a man skillful at his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. And I love that proverb because the example is like, in our culture, we got to do these things to get ahead and make lots of money, right?
Yeah.
But that proverb and other examples too show if you do good work that loves your neighbor like God has called us to, like the rest of it will take care of itself. God will put you where you need to be. And so that's the shift for our students that they need to take.
Yeah.
So Lewis, as we wrap this one up, like what encouragement would you give parents as they, are walking through this with their children and helping them navigate this ambition or achievement trap?
Look, what we're talking to you about today is different from what they're hearing from their peers, what they're hearing on YouTube, what they're seeing on TikTok or social media. It's different from what they're seeing in movies and TV shows. You're helping them discover where God wants them to serve and where God wants to use them. This is a discipleship moment. So when you sit down with your student, when you walk through these circles, you're doing something counterculture. You're telling them that their gifts are not about them. Their gifts are about something bigger. And that's the shift that we want, right? Not from ambition to being passive, but from upward mobility to outward ministry. We want kids who are driven. We want kids who are talented. We want kids who are excellent at what they do and who wake up every morning knowing that excellence has a purpose beyond their own name.
That's great. And this is a great reminder of just, we're raising our children not for a career, right? But for eternity. So thank you all for listening today to Equipped for Impact. And if this episode encouraged you, please share it with another parent who could use this resource and last week's as the first two parts of our 3-part series. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode as we're wrapping up this series with the idea of the impact phase, right? Moving from being consumers to creators. And until then, keep leading the next generation to stand firm in their faith and influence the world for Christ.